My name is Cassandra. I'm a zoologist interested in ethical travel as well as conservation psychology.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all, so this episode is going to be a little bit different from what we normally do. My guest this week is Cassandra Ray, and she is, as she said in her intro, a zoologist. She does have a zoo background. We do talk a little bit about her time at the Cincinnati Zoo and the Columbus Zoo, but she's somebody who's doing a lot of ecotourism and travel right now with an organization called Worldpackers. And I've had a lot of people over the years ask me about traveling and, traveling for conservation purposes and the ethics of it and how you can tell if an organization is good or is just in it to kind of exploit the animals and the local populations and stuff. And after doing a lot of research for a variety of reasons, and honestly, after being approached by multiple organizations that I would say are on all different sides of the ethical side of things about maybe leading some of my own trips, I thought it would be a really good idea to talk to someone who I know and respect in this space to give myself and all of you an idea about what ethical ecotourism looks like, and especially truly conservation-focused travel, like where you actually can go and help animals. And so that's what this entire episode is based around. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that I'm excited for y'all to hear. I do have to say, I had an issue with my microphone during this one, and I didn't know that I had an issue with my microphone until I went to edit this. And I'm so grateful that it was my mic and not Cassandra's, because honestly, I'm not sure if this would have been a usable interview if it had been Cassandra's. My mic sucks in this one, y'all. It's not just like sometimes I'm like, oh, this sounded a little bad. No, it was cutting in and out. It was having issues. However, Cassandra did most of the talking because she's really good at all of this stuff. So I apologize in advance for the scratchiness and occasional dropped words in my audio. But the content from Cassandra is very much worth listening to my voice suck. I do apologize for that. So with that said, before we get to the interview, a couple of quick things. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of the podcast. Make sure you're following along on the socials at Rossifari and on TikTok at Rossifari Pod. And if you'd like to support the pod, you can go to patreon.com/Rossifari and sign up to support the pod for as little as $3 a month. So with all of that said, it is time. So here is my interview with Cassandra Ray. Enjoy, y'all.
I'm from Ohio in the United States. A little bit about me. I'm a zoologist, specifically interested in ethical travel within zoology, as well as conservation psychology, and all the things in between there. So currently getting a master's in conservation psychology and working with different travel agencies to help ecotourism be more animal friendly and community based.
Very cool. And so conservation psychology, where are you getting your master's?
I'm going to Miami University. It's in Ohio. They have a really cool project called Project Dragonfly, where it's designed so I can work full time, but still get my degree. It's absolutely amazing if anyone's looking to get their master's degree and is into education. Education's huge for me. I minored in education in my undergraduate. Like, I love teaching people more than anything. I think knowledge is power. And a lot of it has to do with like science communication. And I'm in the GFP program, which is designed so it's all online except for every so often. I go abroad and I have in-field experiences where I'm working with different nonprofits. So like this summer I worked with the Cheetah Conservation Fund in Namibia, and I got to learn a little bit there. And that would be like one of my courses that I get credit for. So it's been really awesome.
That's very cool. Yeah, I spent a little bit of time in that program, but I was doing the other one, the non-travel one.
Yeah. The AIP.
Yeah, AIP. Yeah, I thought it wasn't a great fit for me, but I also didn't realize you could do things like conservation psychology. That's really cool because that's actually something I'm really interested in.
Okay.
I've looked into some other programs that also do that, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, what I like about Dragonfly is it really is kind of create your own. It's more designed for someone who, like, for me, I am neurodivergent, so I don't really I kind of create my own things. I don't really take rules very well, I guess. I'm just kind of think outside the box. And so it's really nice because you kind of get to create your own masters, your own project, and your own focus. And then they just kind of support it. So like if you're into conservation psychology and you want a program that you can kind of make your own, this is a good program. But also it's really good if you're into other ideas within the animal science conservation field as well.
Yeah, that's very cool. Nice. And you mentioned you were in Namibia. That's awesome. I had Dr. Marker on for her second time, like 2 weeks ago or something like that.
She is such a lovely lady. I really, really like her. I was really surprised that when I was in Namibia, she actually sat down and had a meeting and talked to me. And, we ended up working together in some capacity where I was having some volunteers go through here with my travels and also working on social media posts together. But I was just so surprised that she, just such a, accomplished woman, was willing to sit down and have a conversation with me and just so willing to collaborate. And that's just someone I really look up to because I think that is what success is collaborating with people. And, I really like Dr. Lori Merker. That's really cool that you had her on the podcast.
Yeah, she's awesome. And you're right, it is the collab thing. So the funny thing about it too is like she's always thinking about that kind of stuff, which I think is really cool. She I ran into her. So I had her on, I don't know, 2 years ago or something like that. And then I ran into her at AZA. And I was like, oh my gosh, Lori, how are you? And we were just in the like the place, I don't know if you've ever been to the AZA conference, but they have a bunch of vendors there and stuff. And so we were in the vendor hall. And I was like, Lori, how are you? And she goes, Sean Rossi, why haven't I been back on your podcast? And I was like, you could see the wheels turning, but like in a good way, where she was like, I'm sure she hadn't thought about it. But as soon as she saw me, she was like, here's an opportunity to share the story of the cheetah, to get my organization out to more people. And it was immediate. And it was, why haven't I been back on your podcast? Let's set something up. Here's my card. I know you have my contact info, but do not forget me. And like, it's like you said, she this incredibly wonderful and accomplished woman who then made me feel like the star in the moment. And then, of course, as soon as I was like, let's set this up, and she was on, and it was fantastic. That I think that humility in the face of her, and we even talk about it in the episode. She doesn't see herself as like a celebrity in this world, even though she is. And
I completely agree. I think that's one of my favorite qualities that I've only met her once, but the one time, the meetings that we had, the one trip, I met her a couple, like we had multiple meetings over the trip, but like, I don't know her that well, but just from my brief talking to her, it was just very admirable, like the humility, like you talked about. I really want to emulate that in my successes and everything too. And like, I think that everyone has something to bring to the table. And I think she really shows that well. I think that's why she's so successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So we will talk as we go here. We'll talk about all different aspects of what you do. But you took an interesting path to where you are now, I think. And so, can you talk a little bit about your early education and then your early career?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I grew up in Northeast Ohio. I grew up in a pretty small town. And when I graduated high school, I graduated like the top percentage of the class, and I did fairly well. I got a good scholarship to Ohio State. So that is where I did my undergrad. And during my undergrad, I worked like 3 full-time jobs because I needed to be able to afford college. And, a lot of animal degrees do not pay a lot of money. But I wanted to build experience in my field. So I thought, let me get all the experience I can. I will back up a little bit here. In high school, I did work at the Akron Zoo, but I was working the carousel and birthday parties. So that's kind of where I first started. Yeah. I realized I wanted to work in education because when I was at the carousel, instead of like being a normal human being and just doing the carousel, I would talk to the kids and everyone in the carousel about animal facts and just nonstop talking. And then like during my break, I would go in front of like the capybara exhibit and like start talking and act like I was an educator basically and talk about the capybaras. And then one day, one of the keepers saw me do that, and they were like, then they saw me later at the carousel, and they were like, you should really get an education. And they kind of helped me out. And so I was like, yeah, I guess I never thought about it as a career. And so then that's when I decided to major in zoology and minor in education and work hopefully in an education department at a zoo. So then when I was in my undergrad, I went to Ohio State. I worked 3 full-time jobs. And I volunteered. So I volunteered at a primate sanctuary. I was really lucky. There was one nearby the campus that it was about a half hour away. And I got really close with the owner. She was just kind of the sweet old lady who she has a sanctuary, and all of the gibbons are rescues from the exotic pet trade, and she just takes care of them out of her own pocket. And she tries her best. She's just a really sweet lady, and so I wanted to help her as much as I could. We got really, really close. I volunteered there. I still help out. Like I'll help with some fundraisers and things like that. We still talk fairly often. But I trained the gibbons there for a while I was in school. I really, really enjoyed that. It was such great experience, and I was really thankful that she was willing to give me a chance, even though I didn't have a lot of experience, because the only other experience I really had in the field was growing up on farms, so general animal husbandry. And then I worked at the Columbus Zoo as well, where I worked in education. So I was constantly on the microphone, teaching people, talking about animals, all of that good stuff. And then I also worked in an entomology lab where we would bring insects to like schools and try to get over that stigma, because insects are so cool and kids need to realize that. Everyone needs to realize that. So we would showcase that and how important they are. And that was a really fun job too. And then I also helped with the scientific research behind that as well. Really funny story of how I got that job, but that's for another time. So I did that when I was in my undergrad. And then I graduated, I think it was 2022 from Ohio State, and I moved to Cincinnati. My fiance now, he was in medical school at UC. And so I moved to Cincinnati. And we moved to Cincinnati. I started a job at the Cincinnati Zoo. And I worked 2 jobs in the Cincinnati Zoo. So I did overnight education for a long time. Like I just stopped working there 2 weeks ago. So I've been there for about like 2.5 years. And I really, really loved it. It was just very part-time. as you know, the field is super, super competitive, and it can be really hard to get full-time positions. And so it was just wasn't in the cards, I guess, which is okay because I got a really cool job where during all this time, I would always highlight all of the different things I would do, whether it was like in between there, like I worked at the parks for a little bit, things like that. I always highlighted and talked about animals on my social media. And because of that, I was able to get a job through a company called Worldpackers, where they saw me doing animal education online and they said, "That is really cool. We see a lot of potential in you. Would you like to lead a trip with us?" And I was like, "Oh, what is this?" This seems a little weird. Seems a little too good to be true because they were asking me to lead like sea turtle conservation trip with people in my audience. And I looked into it and it was legit. And the nonprofit was a legit nonprofit and everything looked really good. So I thought, you know what, I'll give it a chance and see how it goes. So I went to Ecuador and I think it was like 5 people come along with me. And I did my first ever trip and it was really awesome. I mean, I made the most amazing memories. And I thought, wow, I want to do this full time. I want to do this forever. And at this point, my fiance is now a doctor. And so the last few years, I've been paying all of our bills. And he said, you know what? You can take some time back and relax. You go ahead and travel and do this. You might not be making as much money as you were, but I want you to have fun. And I was like, thank you. And so I started doing that. I led like 12 trips in the span of a year, all zoology. And my social media really started kind of taking off. Not anything huge or anything. And that was never the intention. It was always just to inspire people. But that kind of started taking off. And then eventually, because I kept leading so many trips through Worldpackers, I got a full-time job there. Eventually, I started working as a campus ambassador there, and now I'm working as like the animal ethics zoologist trip coordinator there. So it's been a journey. Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, no, I think the reason you and I have known each other for a while, social media.
Yeah.
But we've never really connected until just recently. And the reason why is I've now had a bunch of different of these organizations reaching out to me. Same thing.
Right.
Do you want to trip? Do you want? I do. It's a fun idea, but I want to make sure that it's done ethically. I want to make sure that it's a real company, both for me and my people, but also what you said on the other side for the animals and the area. And I don't know anything about that. So I reached out to you and I remember I was just like, hey, whatever, is this something we can talk about? And then seems like you and I have had a lot of the same experiences of like getting bigger online and like the weird kind of building a community, but also feeling lonely sometimes because you're just staring at a screen and all of that. And the little bit of conversation that we've had about that has been nice. And I was like, well, let's get you on the podcast and maybe we can even collaborate on some travel stuff down the road. So,
Yeah. Well, I think it's really, really important, like you said, to make sure that it is ethical. There's a lot of companies that are a little tricky, that don't necessarily do their research and aren't community based or are in the favor for the animals. And so, and this kind of goes out to anyone who's listening, like, if you get any opportunity or anything like that too, like I am always here to help. Like I want ecotourism to be something that is positive for everyone.
Right. On both sides, like we both were saying.
Absolutely.
Very cool. So let's talk about that a little bit. Not necessarily from like a creator's perspective of like how to plan a trip, like the stuff we were talking about, but just for my listeners who are like, I'm inspired, I'm constantly looking at this animal content, I want to go to Ecuador, Australia, Nepal, whatever, and like see animals. How do you do that in an ethical way? Because my goodness, there's a lot of unethical stuff out there.
Oh, yeah, there is. And the thing is, it is so tricky. I mean, the world is not black and white. It is lots of different shades of gray. And it is so confusing. And even me, who like I have dedicated so much time studying and like really trying to define things can get swindled sometimes. So, you know, it is okay to give yourself room to grow and like know that, you know, um, it's not very simple, but there are usually a few things that I will stick to when I'm like onboarding specific hosts, for example. So, for example, right now, Worldpackers has hired me to onboard all hosts that like do checkups on them to make sure that any hosts that have to do with animals in any capacity are indeed up to par. And so I'm setting up like a whole thing of standards currently. I'm actually going to work on it after our podcast today, continue working on it in a whole project with terms of how we can implement it into day-to-day practices within the team of how they are going to have checkups and make sure that everyone is up to par. So it is very, very difficult. Usually it can be really hard from a customer perspective because you can't always message the companies and be like, can I see these documents, right? But what one thing you can do is you can evaluate their social media. Usually you can tell just by pictures and reviews and things like that. If you see a lot of pictures where they're taking selfies with the animals, or it's a lot of, it seems a little maybe exploitative, it probably is. You know, there is a fair balance where a lot of nonprofits need a way to make their income. And sometimes they do resort to that, which is very unfortunate, especially in today's world where there's a huge demand for that kind of thing, which I think is where education comes in. But usually with that, that is one good way you can tell. Also, it is a little tricky because a lot of people will use the word sanctuary very interchangeably. And even though that they use the word sanctuary and things like that, that does not mean that they actually are. There's no legal bounds to that word. So usually you need to look at reviews. You need to look at their tag as well. Like, what are they actually, like, not what they're posting, but what are they tagged in? And what do other organizations say about them? Like when you just search up their name on Google. Another thing is, are they very transparent about how they got their animals? How transparent are they? When they're on their website, are they saying this animal was rescued from the pet trade? Or they're just like, this is Sheila, you know? Like, are they giving context? That usually is a really big indicator. And how hands-on, like not volunteer, well, yeah, volunteers just guests are with the animals. That can be a big red flag too. Because as you know, it requires you know, some animals are very dangerous and you really should not be hands-on with them unless you have proper degree, or not even degree, just experience and knowing what to do. So there are a lot of things like that. Generally just how touristy it is. You can usually tell by that kind of stuff. Now, when getting into the nitty-gritty of implementing them into an actual organization, I mean, I have documents, like government documents, all of that kind of stuff, and like onboarding a whole process, which I'm still trying to figure out all the logistics for to really cover my bases. And I'm sure that's going to change over time and constantly be changing, especially with increased technology, and people are going to be, yeah, so it's forever evolving. But I would say, yeah, the main things that I look out for are just transparent practices, making sure they're very transparent, looking at not what they're posting, but what other people are saying about them, other reviews, other tags, other organizations, and always taking it with a grain of salt too. Because, you know, there are some people who are a little out there sometimes that just want to complain to complain.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of, now I will say a lot of I would argue, most organizations actually do have good intent. it's very complicated. They do have good intent. It's just they don't have the financial means to do so. So they have to resort to certain things. And so it's very, very complicated. So, yeah, so I mainly look for those two things when I'm looking, if I'm as a guest looking. And then, yeah, if anyone has specific questions, I'm not thinking of anything right now off the top of my head. Oh, yeah, and the animal interactions, just limiting animal interactions, seeing if they're exploiting the animals within their practices is a big one. Yeah, I would say those are the main three that I would look out as a consumer.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me, and it is important. I also think what you touched on in such a almost throwaway way, because you're right, it is, but it's also, I think it's the center of all of the controversy about the animal stuff in general, about zoos, about aquariums, about travel, is that it almost all comes from a good place. Obviously, I say almost because there are people like that do the cub petting and stuff that it's not ethical. We know that, but I think most people are trying to do their best and think they're doing their best, and maybe don't understand the science or keep up on all of that stuff, but think that they're doing the best for animals. I've talked to so many people that work at zoos or aquariums that are bad, that are, I don't have them on the podcast, but I talk to them in private, and they're talking about, this place is terrible. Our husbandry is terrible. Our standards are terrible. But I didn't know that when I got hired, and I'm now saying to fight for my animals and try and make things better.
Exactly, and I'm the only positive influence on that animal, so I need to stay there for that animal. I know many people in that situation. Yes.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing, and like a lot of the anti-zoo crowd genuinely are coming from the same love of animals that you have, that I have, that we all have, that makes us love zoos and maybe work in zoos and all the things. And I think it's such an interesting, unique situation, because people will say that there's no way to do eco travel without it being exploiting of the animals. And I disagree with that
a lot.
But it's coming from the same place. The same people who think that are coming from the same place as the people who will spend thousands of dollars to go with you and do this stuff. And it's so interesting.
It is. It's all about perspective and education, as well as just your experiences and like what you know. I've had a lot of experiences where like I will post something about an opportunity coming up online, especially on Facebook for some reason, where people will just automatically assume the absolute worst. You're taking money away from communities and things like that. I'm like, no, actually, like, I'm working directly with the community. Like, we're staying at at a community's like household. Like, we're working at their nonprofit, and we're contributing to ongoing research. So it can be really hard sometimes, but I always try and reach people with patience and empathy, because I know I don't have it right all the time. And I know that I've probably been that person. So I try my best. It is hard when people aren't respectful when they come at you, though, because I always try and be as respectful as I can be, so that can be a little difficult, but I think just reaching people halfway and just knowing that like everyone has different experiences, and it's, as we said, as like the theme I feel like of this episode is like everything's very gray, and that's a huge factor in that, and a lot of people just have to have those experiences in their life to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still so, I just find it so amazing, because at the end of the day, like most conflicts that you hear about, political conflict or whatever, it's like you see the world from a completely different perspective. You see the world from your starting place is completely different. And when it comes to animal stuff, you're actually starting at the same place, and then it diverges. And that's so different than most conflicts you see nowadays.
And you have to think about like cultural influences. I mean, like, that's huge, right? Or even just household, like how your maybe you grew up on a farm where you grew up killing animals for meat. You know what I mean? Like it's all so different. Or you grew up in India where the cow is sacred. And so it everything shapes it, really. It's very, very intricate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's cool that you're doing that and out there in the field though, and learning. And speaking of field, talk to me. Talk to me about some of the trips that you have been on.
Yeah. Oh, as soon as you said that, I just start smiling because they're like the
You
best
really
memories of
did.
my
You lit up.
life. Well, I will say, I worked with so I've done a fair amount of trips. My first one that I ever went to, like traveled alone, was in South Africa. Um, and that was just working at a zoo there and helping out. And it was really fun. It really, that safari going to Kruger National Park is what lit up that spark in me, where I was like, oh my gosh, there is so much of the world out there that I need to see. And I just remember being on that safari the whole time, like bawling my eyes out. Like it was just amazing, amazing. Um, and so after that, that's kind of when I started. I was like, okay, I need to save everything I can and try and make this into a career. And so then I saved, and 6 months later, I saved up like a good amount of money. And 6 months later, I did a trip to Belize, and I worked at the Belize Zoo there, and I worked with Jaguar. And oh, wow. Yeah, I had some crazy experiences. I remember at one point, this wasn't as community based trip as mine are now, which I love the community based trips now. This was more husbandry, um, and some research. So we did some research where we were studying jaguar out in the wild. And it was just me, and one night on a shift, me and this guy named Russell. And he indeed looks like Russell from Up, if you know. Yeah. And so I love him so much, but I don't think that either one of us are going to take on a Jaguar. And if anything were to go south, which shouldn't, Jaguar are super elusive, but that's why I wasn't worried about it. But we were like, let's go do our night patrol and see if we can find any. And so we were doing our night patrol, and it's super dark, and it's just us, and it's my first time out in the field at night, and I'm real scared. And all of a sudden I hear like a thrash beside me, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I hear another thrash beside me, and then a three-banded armadillo came out right in front of me, and I was like, oh my gosh, so cute. We keep walking. Then I hear a roar, like a growl, like a real deep growl. There's a jaguar right there.
Oh wow.
He followed us. It was moments like that where it was just really cool. It was awesome. And I was like, oh, I want to keep doing things like this. So after that, let's see, I did my trip to Ecuador. I went to the Galapagos. And all this was community-based conservation. So working with local schools, which I absolutely love working with children and inspiring them. And then helping animal conflict. So like in Namibia, a huge conflict, as I'm sure you know, you probably talked about with Lori, is the cheetahs killing different goats in domestic. And so it was a lot of trying to mitigate human wildlife conflict and things like that, and working with local communities, seeing where they come from and meeting them halfway. So a lot to do with that. And then I had one in Thailand that I had a trip with, and I stayed in this mountains in the middle of like northern Thailand, really in the middle of nowhere, just these mountains. And I stayed with a tribe called the Karen tribe. They are so like their language is just oral. It's not even written. Like it's very, very niche. Yes. And I got to stay with them, and they were the most amazing people. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. But they by the end of the week, I mean, I was like speaking not very well, but speaking Karen. They didn't speak English, so it was very, very interesting getting to learn from them. And it was really cool. I helped them at their elephant sanctuary. So that was absolutely amazing. I did that for a little bit.
So pause for a second. Hold on. So there's a tribe that doesn't speak English, that doesn't even have written language. How the heck does blonde girl from Ohio manage to, like, how do you make those connections so that you can even get there? Because I'm assuming you can't just email them and be like, hey guys, can I come stay? Like,
fair question. So it's actually Worldpackers. Okay. So Worldpackers is associated with them. And we have a person there that speaks English and Karen, but most of the time when we're there, we're with people who just speak Karen. So a lot of our communications are learning Karen, or like through documents, videos, and then just communicating through pretty much like charades and talking. But you would be surprised how much meaningful conversations you can have without spoken words. Like, it's really amazing. I would say I met the most, like, just amazing people they're just the most happy people when I was there. And the children were so much fun. So that's it's most of the time, no, you would not be able to just contact something like that. But the organization that I am affiliated with, that I work with, that is how community-based we are. We are like literally going into like little tribes and little towns and countries and helping out the nonprofits. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, that is really special. That's very cool. Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. So with the sea turtles, what kind of conservation work, like if somebody comes and does like a trip with you and gets to do that kind of stuff, what kind of stuff are they going to get to do?
Yeah, so usually for sea turtles, it's a lot of night patrols. So we usually walk around with our red lights at night, and we will try and find the specific species that are nesting there at that time. So let's just say, for example, we have some olive ridley sea turtles. So we're going to walk at night. We're going to find olive ridley. We see one nesting. So we're going to stay behind it. And when they're laying their eggs and when they're building their nest, they're in such a trance. They're so exhausted, they don't even realize that you're there. So we'll stay there, and we essentially will collect their eggs when they are laying their eggs. We count the number of eggs, make sure that everything looks good. And then we'll usually, depending on where the sea turtle laid them, if it's not in a good location, like let's say when I was in Ecuador, a lot of the sea turtles who would lay their eggs, they would lay it right in front of this house that had like 10 dogs. And the dogs would always just go out and like eat the sea turtle eggs the next day. Or poachers would just come out and like get the sea turtle eggs. It was awful. And so we would relocate it into a place that was like safe. And then we would take that data, and that data would be used for future, just biodiversity count, all of that kind of stuff, future research. So yeah, it's a lot of relocating. We'll measure the turtle, see how big the lady is, and maybe what kind of species, if there's multiple species laying at that time in that area, all of that kind of good stuff. And then usually if the trip is on a hatching and a nesting time, we'll also help watch the sea turtles hatch and then make sure they all get safe to the ocean. And I mean, that's so much fun. But yeah, that's mainly it with the sea turtles. And then we'll give like sea turtle lectures so you guys know like what you're looking for, and like, all the cool things, like how their temperature determines their gender and all of that kind of stuff. So it's pretty hands-on. And a lot of it, I will say too, is we'll be walking around during the day, sometimes on the beaches, and you'll notice, like, I've walked right into a poacher before, just going and trying to take the eggs out, and you just gotta, you gotta get them to leave. And then you collect the eggs and you move them somewhere else, or a dog will be getting them and then you stop it in the process. So a lot of it is things like that. But yeah, it's awesome. And then also, not with every sea turtle trip, but a lot of them will work with the local schools too. And we'll go to schools and talk to the kids about the importance of animals and taking care of our earth and all that good stuff.
Very cool. I will say, so sea turtles are one of my favorite animals, but also I cannot understand how they have lived so long evolutionarily because, like you said, they just lay their eggs in the worst places and they make so many bad decisions. I love them, but I can't believe they have not learned in the millions of years.
Yeah, no, it's super, super interesting. And then the only like warm-blooded sea turtle is the leatherback.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah. And then if they evolutionary wise, if they were to swallow like from one wrong hole in their trachea, they're dead. Yep. So it is very weird.
Yeah,
it is weird.
Amazing. Yeah, seeing a leatherback is my dream. It is the number one experience I want to have with an animal.
I did see a leatherback one time when I was like 7. We were in Mexico and we were walking around the beach in a very touristy area, just with my family. And we were walking along the beach and there's this huge like black thing like right in front of me, like it looked like a big rock. And I was like, what is that? And I walked over and my parents were like up doing something. And I was like, there's a turtle. They're like, no, there isn't. And then I walked down. The leatherback was huge. I mean, it looked like a dinosaur. I will never forget that. It really changed my life. I was like, wow, that is so cool. Yeah, that's the only experience I've ever had with the leatherback, but it's ingrained in my brain.
The only experience you've had so far. Is there anything else that you want to share before we get to our last couple of questions?
I don't think so.
Cool.
Yeah,
All right. Good. All right. Then is there one particular, I know you work with many, but is there one particular conservation organization you'd like to give a shout out to?
Probably Zen for Blue. They're located in Florida in the US. They've only been around for like 2 years, but the work that they do is absolutely amazing. They really help a lot of people who cannot afford college to be able to get into marine biology related fields. They realize that there's a lot of people who are like blue collar within the marine biology field that never got a degree. And there's a huge overlap where people think you need to get a degree to work in that field and you really don't. And so they really help people with that and help them get the proper education without having to pay that kind of money. I'm actually leading some courses through them too, which is really awesome. And then they also have really cool women in science scholarships and everything for so many, many different opportunities.
Very cool. And then it is time.
It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about this. I was like, I don't know how many. I mean, I have a fair amount of gross stories, don't get me wrong. But, when you're asked about a story and then you're like, oh, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But I did think of something. So when I was in college, I did volunteer with raptors for a little bit, like big birds, so eagles and hawks and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of them were rehabs. So they would eventually be released, but they were injured. And because they were injured, they could not hunt their prey. So we would have to have frozen mice or rats, and we would have to chop up those mice and rats and make it all nice for them, right? Take out specific guts, put vitamins in them, all that kind of stuff, right? And I was always really grossed out by this, but I did it anyways. And one morning they're like, you have to go and like Cass, like, can you go prepare like the rats for like the owls? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. And so and then they were heading out for the day. They were like, you just go ahead and do this, give the owls the rats, and then you can like head out and like lock up. And I was like, okay, no big deal. So I did that. And I guess sometime like when I was, because, you're chopping up and preparing those meals for a good hour. Because we had like a lot of raptors, and I'm over there. I'm listening to my music, and I could have had an itch or something underneath my underneath my nose, and with my glove on, and I went like this, and I got a bunch of like blood all over my face, like from like itching my face. But here's the thing: I didn't realize it, and so eventually it just kind of dried on my face. I lock up, I go home. Okay. My fiance is home, and I was like, hey, like, it's so nice to like see you. Like, it's been a long day, and I go to give him kisses, and he's like, what is wrong? And then like, I'm like, have blood all over me. And I go, what? And I go to take off my jacket, and like 3 mealworms fall out. So it was so that was one of those moments where it was like, oh my gosh, like it was just funny.
That's amazing. Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing all of this. It has been fun. And I look forward to hopefully working on things in the future.
Yeah, me too. Just feel free to message me whenever. And yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm really excited. Thanks for having me on the podcast today.
I don't know about you, but that 100% made me want to get off my butt and get into some other countries and do some cool conservation travel. So, Cassandra and I are going to be looking at some opportunities and options for that. And as is always the case, you never know what is going to happen. But I think we're going to be partnering on some stuff, and I'm hoping this will lead to a very cool next chapter for Rossifari. So keep your eyes on the socials, keep your ears here, and we'll talk more about that if and when everything works out. So with all of that said, we'll be back here on Friday for another brand new Zoo News episode, which I am going to be excited to share with y'all as we finally get caught up. And before I get going, I do want to take a moment to thank y'all for being here, and especially to thank my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, who is also here for stickers, Kevin Williams, and Cormac McMuffin. Meow. Thank you all so much for your support. We'll be back on Friday, and until then, remember, friends, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari, or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.